Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. And you know we're in the off-season. Whenever the NFL, I'm trying to get any news, Matt, any news that I can. And even on the NFL's own site, they're just posting top 10 lists. Like, you know that there's no stories coming out. It's like, what the hell are you even doing at this point? That you would think they would figure something out. Other than, like, oh, let's see the top 10 playmakers or the top 10 quarterbacks that could move up and be a Hall of Famer or a Pro Bowler. And just random garbage that definitely we're not going to do. So if you saw the title and you thought that we were going to be doing our own top 10 list, you'd be wrong because I'm not doing that. But they did have a little bit of news, Matt. Did you see Deshaun Watson has another accuser now?
It's a big negative.
I don't see how their NFL is going to clear him. Maybe I'm wrong. But you can't just keep getting lawsuits thrown at you, especially after, didn't they give him a big extension?
Yeah.
So now you're like, what do you think they do going into the season? The NFL has to clear him. Do you think it gets done, or do you think they just stick with Baker?
No, 100% I think it gets done, because you don't make a move of that size and try to put that much cap investment into it unless you've talked to league officials and you're like, hey, we want to make this move. Are you going to crack down on it? Like what's going to be the ramifications? And I think it may be like a situation where they're going to say, well, unless based off of what legal things are going on, if there's any grounds that those charges are going to stick and that they go through trial and he could end up with like felonies or things like that, then it would be a different story. But if they're reaching out to like their solicitors and they're saying no, like he may be able like to settle out of court and it's not going to be something that's going to be a quote bigger issue. I could see him totally not only playing but ending up being one of the faces of the league.
I think it's going to be, at least from the Browns' perspective, sort of like how LSU just kept like, oh, we'll keep that in the courts, but in the meantime, we're going to just keep plugging along with our team, you know?
Yeah.
And then they're able to win a championship. And then after that, people were like, I can't believe Coach O's gone. It's like, bro, he was under investigation like the entire time. Like, they just didn't care. So the Browns are going to have to, they invested all the money, unless they have some type of ripcord put into that contract where they're able to just pull it out and say, like, nope, you got to pay this back, kind of like a Brett Favre thing, where maybe he doesn't pay it back. I don't know. Because if you don't play, a lot of the NFL stuff's not really guaranteed. And I would imagine that their lawyers have something about the lawsuits in there. But it's crazy that they keep popping up after they get thrown out of court. So it can't be like an NFL, like they can't just keep waiting on it. It's how many years now?
Well, right. And I feel like there's a lot of times where you can sit, like, you want to look at each case individually, but I feel like there's no type of consistency with the enforcement of their rules. Like, you know, you have players that just get absolutely slammed, and then there's guys that there's nothing. You know, like Watson with all these charges could potentially have nothing. Just he sat out last year.
And another contract, switching topics a little bit here because we really don't know on the Watson thing. Aaron Donald, do you think he gets a deal?
His situation's in an interesting place because I think he could potentially get a deal, but at the same time, he's won his Super Bowl. He could very conceivably walk away too.
Well, that's kind of the ultimatum he kind of put up. He said unless he gets that new contract, he's not playing. He doesn't care. The money that they're guaranteed for this season isn't worth it. Like you said, he already has his championship, so he's just going to walk away. I know that they had to make a lot of other moves. Like they lost Von Miller and a couple other pieces to that team. Do they pay him? I don't even know what he's looking for because he had talked about walking away before. So is he looking for just a short-term contract, more guaranteed? And if they have it, I don't see how they wouldn't give it to him. But maybe they're just going to play chicken and say, all right, go ahead. Because, like, how many times do you see a guy's like, I'm going to retire, and then they're back? I mean, Tom Brady, he was only home for a couple weeks, man. And then he's like, you know what? I got to get back there. But he's a totally different beast. I don't know. Maybe Aaron Donald's ready to retire. It's a lot different when you're just throwing the ball and winning titles than you're in there getting, like, thrown around. People are grabbing you, ripping at you. So I would think that he'd have a little bit more physical nature to it than just like, hey, I can't really throw anymore. I better only eat fish and plants. Can't have high mercury levels. The Tom Brady diet. And that's not even a shot at my man. I love Tom Brady. Let's see. I think those were the two big ones where they came out. Who was the player that ended up dying in the car accident for the
Vikings, the cornerback?
Yeah, which was kind of crazy. And to be honest, I'm not even I'm kind of surprised it doesn't happen more often, because you're out there. They said that he was speeding. Jeff Gladney from TCU. I had part of it up, but I wanted to make sure that I got it right. Car accident, and if you just think about just based on how many players they have driving to practice every day, to me, I would think that it would be a higher occurrence, but maybe they're working out at such time where there's not traffic. Because, if you're in the NFL team, I guarantee that they're not driving in during rush hour, right? Because, that would just be insane. Why would you want to put your guys at that risk? So, another sad day. I mean, just crazy that there was, two in such bang-to-bang with Haskins and now this one. It's I don't really remember an off season where active players were dying.
Yeah, it is really unfortunate.
Let's see. Did you have anything else for the NFL? I honestly didn't have a lot today. That's kind of why I put the joke title up, the top 10 list. And that was only because I went to the NFL to see if there was any movement on some of the whatever. I wanted to see, hey, is there movement on any of the free agents that have been floating around? Are they moving Garoppolo? Some of the stuff could be happening soon. And I bring it up right now just to read it to you. The first article is top 10 deep passers of 2021, Matt. Not even, hey, we're not even going to do quarterbacks. We need to break this out so that it takes all summer. We're going to start with deep passers.
Did Josh Allen get number one?
His picture's on it. I did not click the article. Because I'm I don't need to read that. I could write that article. If they had a picture of Ben Roethlisberger on there, then I'd be intrigued. Does his arm even work? I don't see Aaron Rodgers on here either. It's just Matt Ryan and stuff. So I'm not sure exactly where they're going with that or what they're trying to do, but I don't need to be reading that. We'll be checking in next week. Hopefully we'll get some bigger news coming out. Do you have anything else for the NFL?
I did see an earlier report about Matt Ryan with the Colts, and I do think that Indy now is going to be a contending team because they seem like they were trying to get consistent quarterback play, and they never could keep that person there. So I'm curious to see how they do now with Matt Ryan, who was for a while a stabilizing force with Atlanta. That I think that could be a missing piece for them to get them over the hump. And
the one thing with that is you're almost looking at it from, is it really him? Because they did put a lot of stuff into their wide receiving core for him and the offense. They didn't really focus on the defense. So a team that kind of has the weapons, but it's not really quarterback focused. I do want to see how he goes in that offense. It kind of played out. But I don't know, because it's kind of they're kind of there, and are they real contenders? It's hard to tell, right? Phillip Rivers did pretty well there, and I think that gave a lot of people a lot of false hope. But if I'm comparing the two, just in terms of career, who would you rather have, Matt Ryan or Phillip
I'm going to say Matty Ice. He went to a Super Bowl.
He did go there. He ran into the unstoppable force.
He was a participant.
He played half the game.
All he had to do is keep throwing touchdown passes.
Yeah, he played half the game, and then he gave up, and then that was it. So I don't know what else they could have done in that second half. I mean, they could have ran the ball a little bit more. That's where they weren't really balanced, and we'll see if it pays off because, like I said, it's hard to tell. Were they that close? And is he going to be able to come in and help turn that corner? Because he was a part of some pretty bad Falcons teams. And a lot of people blame the defense. They're like, well, the defense is getting shredded and the offense isn't really on the field. But I think you could, in the NFL, the talent's close enough where you should be able to not be blown out so much if you had a semblance of some offense, you know? Maybe I'm wrong.
It's not even so much the offense. It was the fact that they just, after that Super Bowl run, they lost their coordinators, and then they progressively just let every defensive piece go. And I think when you look at when you're building a Super Bowl run, you got to make sure your defense is on point. And to the credit of the Rams, you know, when you looked at how close they were, they go and get Von Miller, they go and trade for Jalen Ramsey, they go and bring in all these different defensive players to boost up around their offense. And then that last piece was OBJ that pushed him over the top together. And I know he only played a limited role in the Super Bowl, but it was still a big part of getting him there.
And just piggybacking off that, I think a lot of teams like the Steelers and the Packers, they have sustained success because they just keep investing in the defense, like on the other side of the ball. The teams you see go offense, the Jets, the Falcons, like they might have a little blip here and there, but it's not a sustained success. Like when you're able to stand and look at a Hall of Fame quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger and tell him, like, we're letting your weapons go, and we're not going to bring anybody in to help you. Like, that takes some balls by the organization, I think. Right? Because, like, you know they're there. He took some salary cuts. On the other hand, Aaron Rodgers just keeps taking more money, so the club can probably be like, hey, buddy, what do you expect us to do? Like, what do you want us to do? We got to invest in the defense because you could get hurt, something could happen. And remember last time in the playoffs, the defense kept us in it. The special teams might have lost us the game, but you know how it goes.
But I think you bring up a really good point that you look at the different players on the skill side for offense that Pittsburgh has cycled through over the last couple of years. I mean, it's like receivers come and go on a regular basis, but you know the ones it seems that Roethlisberger had good chemistry with, he was willing to restructure his contract and kept those guys paid.
And that's the one thing. Yeah, you got to be able to restructure. I think that's a key part of it. I think Matt Ryan is definitely more organization focused. So we'll see what happens there. I do think that the Colts are going to be a contender with him at quarterback. I'm just not sold on it yet because his age is up there. We'll be keeping a close eye on him. Is there anything else you had for the NFL or anything you're looking for this offseason?
I was curious to see how things were going to play out in the let me just double check because it was on. That wasn't like maybe with Gruden and his investigation with the NFL, because there's a second time that he was in court and they ruled in his favor that the NFL's moved to arbitration and denied the motion to dismiss charges. That puts him 2-0 against the NFL right now with these charges. So I know at the time when they were bringing all those racist allegations against him, there was also parts of the Commanders in Washington football teams and like investigation as well that was being buried. So it was being put out there. So I'm curious to see how that continues to go. That if they continue pushing it to court, how that's going to play out for Gruden.
And that's the one thing, too, where now they're just going to try to open everything up. And surprisingly, they didn't get it thrown out. I thought the NFL would have been able to do that. I still think the other investigation into the Redskins, I don't know what's going to happen from that. And you can get mad at me saying Redskins or whatever, but that's who the investigation is for. It's not the new team, the Commanders or whatever. This is like a few years ago they've been looking into. So Gruden's emails were a part of it. Honestly, it does feel like they leaked only Gruden's emails, right?
Yeah.
Someone had an attack on him. Now, whether it was the NFL and Goodell, like he's saying, it's up to the NFL to prove that. So let's see what happens. But it's something we will be keeping an eye on as we go forward. Let's see here. So the next big thing I had for the show, shifting a little bit of gears out of football into the NHL and the NBA. I'll start with the NBA because we had some big game sevens. And surprisingly, the Celtics, Matt, able to get it done to make the finals against Golden State. Looking at the playoffs, like I wrote the Celtics off like in the middle of the year. I don't know if I brought it up on the show, but they were like right around 500, and I thought, this is never going to happen. They talked about Brad Stevens being so great. Oh, he's going to be the greatest coach or whatever. Then he kind of stepped away. I kind of felt like he was not really forced out, but he kind of just like gave up. Like, hey, it's not as easy as I thought. I'm just going to become a GM. And then there are rumors like that was like a temporary move. He might go back to college, which didn't happen. Able to kind of rebound, get through the Nets. I think a lot of people had the Nets upsetting them with Durant and Kyrie and stuff. Never happened. And then if you look at it from the 76ers, man, you have to be upset if you're a Sixers fan. Because everything you've been doing, your team on paper seems like it should be able to take that next step. And then here the Celtics are. They're not even winning. They're not even winning good. Like if you watch the game 7, they had a big lead. Completely just blew up at the end of the game. Jimmy Butler comes down, has a wide open 3. I thought he should have drove the ball. They're saying that he was tired and he just didn't want to go to overtime, whatever. I understand that. If it was like some other player on the team that actually, made 3-pointers, I would have 100% been open to that shot. But as soon as he took that shot, I thought, well, this is a miss and the Celtics are going to win now. Like I knew whenever he stopped, that shot wasn't going in. He had too much momentum going down, and he really kind of just leaned into it, where it was like, thank God he took that. And even one of the interviews, I think it was Marcus Smart, they interviewed him and they're like, what did you think on that shot? And he just said, I thought, what the hell is he doing? Like he's trying to win the game right there. There's 20 seconds left. So I think there was 20 seconds left. So people were playing it off like, oh, he went for the dagger. It would have been a 1-point lead at that point. And you give the Celtics plenty of time to go down, draw up a play, get in the paint, eat the clock, and get the last shot. Like I didn't understand it. It wasn't the hero shot that everyone made it out to be. Like if there was like 5 seconds left and he's like, you know what, I'm winning this right here. But there was plenty more time. So I was kind of shocked by that. And then even the Mavs not showing up with Luka. And so now Golden State's back in it. It really feels like a more commanding dynasty, right? Over anything that LeBron's been able to put together. I don't know how you can look at Steph Curry and write him off. And be like, oh, he's not that good, They keep reinventing their team, and for some reason he's doing it with the same exact team over and over again. He's not jumping around trying to make a super team. Like, they filled it in. I brought up Jordan Poole from Michigan. Like, they had to develop that guy. Coming out of Michigan, people weren't like, oh, this guy's going to be good, and he's going to get the team to the finals. Like, no. It was him and a couple other guys they really developed to get that team there, so... I think I've been harsh on the NBA saying, like, you're going to get the top couple seeds they're going to be in this year. No. I mean, you might have the mainstay in Golden State, but anyone in January that bet on the Celtics getting here, you're crazy. Like, you're absolutely insane. There's no way I would have picked them, and that's a team I even pull for. Like, I have zero confidence going into the finals because of how bad they've been winning. like I said last week, when you're just jacking up threes, and then you have a cold night and you're getting blown out, and then the next night you're hot, it's like, what the hell am I watching? But maybe that's the NBA these days. I don't know. Can you get Steph Curry 4 cold shooting nights in the finals? Maybe. They say the Celtics have a great defense. They're like, that the great defense is what does it. And then in the same exact post-game statement, everyone's talking about how the Heat were hurt. The Heat, luckily they got hurt. Otherwise, Boston never would have beat them. I'm like, well, then which is it? They either have the good defense or the Heat were hurt. Like they didn't give me any confidence going further. I don't know if you watched any of the NBA stuff, but how do you feel watching that as a Sixers fan?
Well, it hurts my heart because Boston plays a style that I think you need to play to make the finals runs. I think when you live and die by shooting 3-pointers, you become like you get what the Sixers are, where when they're winning games 132-70, but then when it's gut check time, they're not consistent enough to get over the edge. And I think there needs to be a physical-esque style of play. And I think it definitely took a toll after Embiid got hurt. But I mean that's consistently shown that if you're going to be physical inside, I mean you still need at least a shooter. And I think Curry has kind of evolved the league in this way that you have to have someone who can shoot the lights out. And I think Philly thought they had it with Harden. They've been missing it for a while because they haven't had that consistent guy. Simmons was more of a passer, and you saw it was the moment where you thought, oh, this is why you bring Harden in, and then he passes to boot to cost the Sixers their playoff game, their series. It was like, come on, what are you doing?
And the big key, I think, for Boston is bringing Horford back. Like, he was on the Sixers, and then he went to the Thunder. It's like he's bouncing around, and they were like, no, we're going to bring you in, and you're going to be a key part of our team. Like, they got rid of Kemba Walker just to get Horford back, and I'm like, I always liked Horford. It's kind of like I'm bringing him back some more. It was not as big as like a Paul Pierce where he was there forever. He was only there for a few years, but it's like, I'd like to see him win a championship. Like, I feel like he deserves it playing for the Hawks all those years. And then coming to Boston to like, hey, I'm going to win a championship. And then no, you didn't get it done. And I think people wrote him off after that. Like, that was supposed to be the time where they were getting back to the finals. I don't even think that they did, unless I blocked it out because they lost. They definitely didn't win a championship since the Paul Pierce years. I did hear, like, I'm kind of baffled because I knew, like, the Celtics had, like, a big history or whatever. They've been to, like, I think they said they've been to 22 finals. They've won 18 of them. Like, they win almost every time, which is insane, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Because, like, you hear about, oh, well, yeah, they're going to get to, they have all these championships, and you're thinking, like, well, the East must have just been bad. Like, you know how you get the same team playing all the time. It's like, no, when they actually get there, they pretty much win it. Unless they had the stat wrong that they talked about. But 18 out of 22, that's insane. Or maybe they're going for 18, so maybe it's 17. But to me, like, I know they lost to the Lakers with Paul Pierce, and they lost to the Lakers before. Like, did they only lose when they played the Lakers? Maybe I'm jinxing them here. We'll see what happens. But that's the one thing that stood out to me. It's like, you've never really seen that much dominance in any other sport where you can be like, we're going to put the team together, and as long as you get to the finals, we're winning the finals. Like, Michael Jordan was able to do that. Like, you get to the finals, you're going to win it. And who knows? Golden State has been the team as of late. The only, like, close dynasty. People talked about, like, the run that the Heat had. It hasn't been sustained like this, right? This is like their 6th or something. Finals, maybe 7th. Like, they've been in an insane amount.
Yeah.
So, I think that do they have more championships? Maybe I should have looked it up. But that's the one thing where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, if you're a fan of any other team, previously, like it's always like, well, one of the top runners are going to be there, and who's going to step up? Who's going to do all this stuff? So the Celtics, they have 17. They're 17-4, Matt, in the finals, which is insane.
Wow.
The Lakers, on the other hand, they've had 32 appearances. They're 17-15. So like that's more of what I expected. Like not really caring about NBA history, but like just saying like, oh, they have like so many, they must always be in it, like the Lakers, right? No, that's not the case. Just like they just win it, right? Like the Chicago 6-0, they're like what is that the second? They're third, right? Yeah, they're tied with third. Same with like the Golden State Warriors. They also have 6. So Golden State's been there 12 times. The Bulls have been there 6 times. If you win it, doesn't matter. You'll be remembered forever.
Yep.
So that's the one thing that Lakers fans, man, you get there all the time, but hey, if you won some more of them, they'd really be in first. They almost have to be mad at the Celtics just for that. I don't even know how else to put that in, but that's the one thing where I don't expect them to win, so they'll probably get a 5th loss there. What do you think of that series?
Well, based off of your statistical stuff, I'm just going to go with the Celtics.
I just thought it was insane when they were talking about it, like really casually, like, yeah, they know this is the 22nd time they've been there. They've only won 17 of them. Like they're going for 18. I'm like, wait, do you realize what you're saying? Like they almost always win when they get there, buddy.
I mean, unless it's like the last couple times that they've been there, they've gotten blown out. Then it's like, well, maybe their luck's changed. But
well, see, they have the luck of the Irish going with them, Matt. That's the one thing right there. So I think they had a split, right? Yeah, so they haven't made it since. They split with the Lakers. They won in 08. They lost in 10. They lost in 87 to the Lakers, right? So who else? What other years did they lose? 85 also to the Lakers. So that's 3 losses to the Lakers. This is like incomplete. So I'm not sure. Like they must have had different divisions or whatever. So it's not showing me what the 4th one is. But at least 3 of those 4 losses were to the Lakers. And I knew they split before. So maybe someone else could tell me. I don't know if I'm going to find it here on this list because it doesn't really tell me. But that's what we'll keep an eye out. The other one that I had, the NHL Finals, or Stanley Cup Finals, so we're getting close to that. The Rangers came back and beat the Hurricanes. And I thought the Hurricanes were in a good spot too. I honestly, looking back at the series, I still think the Penguins, if they didn't take that shot on Sid, I think the Penguins win, and the Penguins are playing Tampa Bay right now in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I think you're right.
Like, there's nothing in me. Carolina, the frustrating thing with them, the power plays were so poor that I think at one point they were like 1 for 12 or 13. And I'm like, you got to score the game. Like, you got to score. You can't just be getting power plays and losing. They lost every game on the road, which was insane. I think they said that was like an NHL record where whoever the home team was won every game in all that both series that they played in. And until that last game. Like, you can't just hope that, hey, we're going to be more comfortable on our home ice and get it done. And maybe not having an elite scorer that you can kind of lean on really showed up there on the road. But the one thing, like looking at New York now, I'm thinking Tampa Bay has a clear path. They just crushed Florida, 4-0 with the sweep. They have a talented team. They're back. I think in the West you have the Avalanche that are up right now, unless the game turned around here. Now they're up 6-3. I think you're going to see Colorado play Tampa Bay, and maybe the cup will stay where it always belongs, Matt, here in the South. What do you think?
I think this is what has to happen. The NHL just needs to police the ranks and not just let the Rangers just run around just cracking people in the dome, and problem solved.
And that's the one big thing that I saw, like, that they had so many excuses. And it's like, dude, why are you letting them do it? And the fact that now they're going to get maybe stubbed by just a better team unless you continue to let that happen. But then how far do you let it go where they're just taking shots at players and they're like, well, it kind of is a hockey play if you look at it from this angle. It's like, bro, what are you doing? Like, it looks bad. Like I said for the Sid one, that's the one that baffles me. And just see some of the hits against Carolina, it's like, all right, you're not calling a penalty on that. I'm not going to just complain about the officiating. I'll save that for football season, right? So, like,
if you hit Tom Brady the way that Sidney Crosby was hit, you'd still be doing time. You'd still be in jail for it.
They'd probably give 7 compensation picks. Just like randomly. Like, hey, we decided that's not fair that Tom Brady went down. We know you guys had to bring him on a boat down here.
Yeah.
Try to make him an owner to even get him here. Like, it's only fair if we give you extra picks. I don't know. It's tough, man. That, like, coming in now, do they have a star-studded lineup? Like, they have the guy, the number one player, like the Tom Brady in Sid, and they're just like, nah. Let's let him get hurt, and then we'll make a controversy about it.
It's like play whack-a-mole, and after he gets hurt, like, I don't know. Hockey's just a physical sport, man. What can you say? I don't understand why nobody wants to watch. Well, because you knock out the best players.
It's like whenever people come back now, I look at like Tom Brady and they keep bringing up the tuck rule. And it's like, yeah, when that happened, Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady. He wasn't getting the benefit of the doubt. Like, they just didn't know, and replay was still so young. Like, what are they going to do? You know? They don't know what his intent was, if it was really tucked or not. So with Sid, it's like the total opposite. It's like, you have the footage right there. You know who he is. You let him get taken out of 2 games when they're up 3-1. Carolina wasn't up 3-1. They were going back and forth the entire time, only home teams winning, like I said. And they would have been lined up, which if they would have won, they could have just kept winning only at home until the final series. Because I think Colorado might have had more points. I can't remember. But like, that would have been insane if every series would have went to Game 7 and the home team won the entire time. And Carolina just loses to the finals in the Game 7. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, coach, you have no adjustments to make? Like, obviously something's going on here that your team's losing on the road. This is like a Harbaugh-esque road record. Like, something's going on. You're not preparing your team right. Make that adjustment. But we'll see. We'll be circling back around. Then we're going to have some extra football stuff coming up. Do you have anything else for the NBA or the NHL?
No. Now,
my next piece, because we're really, who knows how long this show will even go. College football without divisions, Matt, it's really picking up. Your boy Jimbo Fisher still fighting with Nick Saban. Nick Saban comes out, and it's almost like he's reading statements from a message board. Or hell, he's even listening to our show. Because he said, well, I've seen some of these proposals of the SEC without divisions, and I really would prefer a 9-game schedule so we can play more of our traditional rivals. We just hope that other conferences want to do the same thing. It's like, buddy, every other conference except for the SEC and the ACC have been doing 9 conference games. Like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, did he even do any research? Does he even know what's going on? Because I can guarantee that the SEC knows that they have that advantage, because I think we just talked about it a week or 2 ago. So it's almost insane. Like, the Nick Saban would be like, hey, you know what? We should do 9 conference games. Then we won't have to play as many cupcakes. Or what they've been doing, they schedule one marquee game. And, like, let's be honest. They weren't scheduling against, like, Clemson or someone. They're scheduling against, I hate to say it, has-beens. Like, they scheduled against Michigan when Michigan was down. They scheduled against Florida State when Florida State's down. They scheduled against Miami, right?
Yeah.
They're not scheduling against Ohio State. They're not scheduling against Clemson or Oklahoma, right? They schedule against Penn State. Like, oh, didn't Penn State just have sanctions? We should get them on the phone. Like, I don't think they were scheduling them when Jopa was there, at least not recently, right?
Right.
That was an O'Brien year, and people were like, well, these schedules that are made so far in advance, but not some of these openers that Alabama's been putting together. They're not scheduled like 10 years in advance. they've been doing those as kind of like the traditional marquee matchup. And there's been some buyouts. Like I know Michigan had like some buyouts. I don't know if it was related to that game. But even more recently, like they were supposed to play, hey, we're going to play like Washington or whoever. And then they're like, oh, last second, we got to cancel that, right? Because like you guys have been winning a lot of games and that's not a good look for us anymore. So we're going to have to let that go. And like it's like, all right, we're going to play Arkansas. And Arkansas's like, hold fast, buddy. We can't have more losses. We got to cancel that game. So then you're like scheduling Army and BYU and all these other teams that are filling in, which aren't bad. And I'd prefer Michigan play them. But in terms of like the marquee matchups, if they're not getting the game against like Florida, the one that they had a few years ago, which was a neutral site game, you don't schedule neutral site games 20 years in advance. Like some of these other matchups. Like I hear about, oh, great news, Michigan has Texas scheduled in 2029 and then they have Oklahoma in 2030. It's like that game will never be played. There's zero chance. And they'll use the SEC. We're joining the SEC now. Sorry, guys. Or like when Notre Dame was there, I was at the game. The AD runs across the field for some reason and hands a note being like, hey, we can't play you guys anymore. Like, we really enjoyed.
My mom says we can't play no more.
Yeah, we really enjoyed whenever we were beating you guys. But now that we're losing like to Brady Hoke, and it's bad. It's a bad look for us. So if we want to make the playoffs, they told us we can't have losses like this, or they're going to keep us out. So we don't know what to tell you. Now we're out. And then Michigan starts winning, and then they're like, hey, we should really get a hold of you guys because they joined the ACC, and every college football playoff people were like, oh, your schedule is really weak, Notre Dame. Like, we know that you're playing 5 ACC schools and then your traditional rivals that you kept, and like Navy, and like you're playing these other weird games against like Toledo and barely winning. It's like, all right, what are you doing? You're not playing Michigan State anymore. You're not playing Michigan anymore. But you're able to keep Stanford now that they're back to being mediocre. Okay, cool. You're playing USC. They're down. Like, they really had no marquee games. Like, they played Florida State that one year. Florida State, that was when people thought Florida State were back. Remember, was that last year or 2 years ago? Then they also had, what was the mesh play? That was Florida State, wasn't it?
Yeah, against Notre Dame a couple years ago.
That was Taggart, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if they scheduled those just to say, hey, we're going to play you guys close so you guys think your coach is good.
Actually, that one might have even been the last year of Jimbo Fisher.
You might be right, because I think you are right.
Because David Robinson's son was playing.
So, I mean, you have those games, but like you can't play Florida State every year. And I saw someone bring up like Pitt, and I had the stats. I brought them up here because people were talking like Pitt like they're garbage, and they don't realize in terms of the ACC, like all time, Pitt has the most national championships. Like you can cut out Princeton and Yale, then the top 5 are Bama, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, and Pitt. The only thing Pitt doesn't do is tell people about it. You know? There's really no difference between Pitt and Georgia, if you're looking historically. Like until this year, like Georgia's last championship was like 80. Pitt's last one is 76. How is that much difference, you know? All they have to do is invest and say, like, we're going to be Pitt football. We're coming back. We're an historical power. It's not like people talk about, I was looking for like a comparison of like, hey, which team like really came around? Like people talk about like Miami's this great team. Miami had like a 2-decade run. They weren't winning championships like Pitt has championships in 3 or 4 different decades. Like they could easily bring that back and say, hey, this is going to be us and this is going to be our identity. I'm surprised that they don't step up. And like I've been saying all along, now's a chance if the ACC goes divisionless, Pitt should be pushing to play their traditional rivals, which would make their schedule easier, which gives you the bump of having an inflated record, which right now what might hurt them. Honestly,
but I think that honestly is to their advantage to play a lighter schedule because in the ACC you don't get a bump game. If Michigan loses a Big Ten game, they're going to get a benefit of the doubt. If the SEC loses 2, they get a bump. because they're in the SEC. You lose a conference game in the ACC, you pack your bags because you ain't getting in.
And that's the one where I think if they get the inflated record, you get that for a few years. Someone was telling me, how's Pitt going to ever do, and like, how are they going to improve their recruiting? Do they have to start playing marquee non-conference schedules? It's like, no. What the hell are you talking about?
Keep winning.
Like, you don't have to play Penn State at all. Forget Penn State. Like, I know Penn State's been doing their unrivaled stick, and maybe Penn State fans will be mad at me for saying this, but Pitt doesn't need you. Pitt should 100% focus on West Virginia and say, hey, you're kind of in the same boat. You're out there on your own. People traditionally know that one game was a national championship game. They know Pitt kept West Virginia out of the national championship game. They didn't realize Pitt was really bad that year. If you look back, most people will kind of be shocked when they're like, oh, Pitt was really that bad. I remember them having like Larry Fitzgerald and like all these great guys like Aaron Donald. It's like, focus on your pros. You guys still have a ton of pros in the league that are good. Like, these are Hall of Fame guys, Matt. It's not like they're like Navy where it's like, remember Roger Staubach? It's like, oh yeah, I do. From King of the Hill.
Well, I was just having that conversation recently with my dad that he was getting frustrated with the NIL money and saying, well, Pitt will never be able to compete with the Bamas and the A&Ms that are going to have these bigger NIL packages available. And I said, let's be honest, you won the ACC this past year, and it's not like you had a roster full of 5-star guys. And he showed with his time at Michigan State, you don't necessarily need to be pulling in those top-tier guys to be competitive on a consistent basis. Now, within the program itself, like, you can't afford to lose to those directional teams and do those like really random, like losing to, like, you got to win outright the games that you're supposed to win. When you play a Youngstown State, you got to blow them out of the water. And when you start doing that more consistently, then you're going to see more of those local recruits stick around. And I think that's where you start to show, hey, you're here. When you go pro, you could be like Kenny Pickett, and you're still working out in the same facility you were working out in college.
If people are talking to me like I'm dumb, and they're like, well, Pitt's only good because Kenny Pickett, it's like, if you're consistently putting Hall of Fame guys in the NFL, it's not a one-off. Like, the talent is there in your area. It's there in Ohio. You've seen teams like Michigan State feast on Ohio, bring their team right up. Look at Cincinnati. They're not taking in ranked guys. They're taking in guys that are overlooked because a lot of teams are focusing on the South. I know I've complained about Pitt on this show, focusing on the South. Why not bring back guys? I bring up Wannstedt all the time. Why not bring these guys back and try to create an NIL package? Like Dan Marino's doing like Nutrislim and all this other crap. Get some of these guys back and form like hey, we know you're already doing the commercials. How about you start doing stuff for Pitt? Like, you start bringing guys in and getting that in. And then I think that helps because, like, I really don't care if Pitt wins one way or the other. I don't really care if the ACC is any good. But in terms of, like, holding off the SEC and keeping out these multi-bids, it's going to be good if the ACC has a perceived power. Clemson might be falling off now, losing coaches, having trouble with NILs so much that Dabo's been complaining about it. Now's the time for Pitt to kind of just step up and become that team that's always there fighting it. I brought up a list. So they started to compile, hey, what would happen if there were no divisions, like going back a few years? Like, Pitt would have been in, they won that championship there. They would have been in it in 2018 when they lost as well. And so you're not going to see any difference. Like, you're still going to be able to be there. I would just say, like, hey, give us our schedule, make it regional. Like, I know you want us to play some of these bigger schools like Clemson and stuff. But if you're Pitt and they're coming to those meetings and they're like, what do you want to see with the schedule? Go with the 3 rivals. Maybe do Syracuse, Boston College, Virginia Tech. Like, get some old Big East things going. And say, like, these are the games that we want protected. Maybe throw Miami in there. I think Miami would be more focused on like, hey, let's get our Florida States and like some of the other teams in here that we've been kind of around, but maybe not. Maybe Miami would rather have a Pitt, and then if you're Pitt, I wouldn't even throw in Miami and Virginia Tech. I would just go one or the other, and then the other two you keep Boston College and Syracuse and try to get them back on the schedule, right? Focus on that Northeast corridor because like Michigan focused on that in recruiting, and look at how many dudes they've been pulling out of like New Jersey and up through there that have been turning into NFL guys. It's like, all right, well the talent's there, no one's really recruiting there. Because it's either like, hey, let's go to Boston College. Like if Don Brown could come to Michigan and pull out a bunch of Northeastern guys and then have the number one rated defense, and then he had a number one rated defense at Boston College, you can do that too, Pitt. And you can say like, hey, we play up there every year. Come play at Pitt where, you have a chance to get in the NFL instead of just going to Boston College or whatever. Like they really need to focus on their history, and that's the one thing that they're not doing. And stop chasing these other programs because like, you're unique. It's almost like Pitt's kind of just gun shy, and they're like, well, it's not like that anymore. Please. That's not us. We're not winners. It's like, okay, well, if you keep talking like that, you're not going to be. So,
well, I think you at one point you'd made a good comment regarding part of Pitt's schedule where like if a recruit were to go to Penn State or they were to go to Ohio State or Michigan, a lot of those schools are close enough that for parents that could make a shorter commute to watch their kid play. Where with playing in the ACC, Pitt was going to struggle because if your games are all down in Georgia Tech and Miami and you're down the East Coast, you're not going to be able to play as many of those types of games unless you buy the ACC plus package for $200 a month. And I think when you look at the opportunities without the divisions, maybe you keep some of those games closer logistically, that now the teams within the ACC, you can schedule them closer and maybe get some of those other pros. I think having a connection with WVU would be really strong for Pitt, just from the standpoint that it's a short distance away that would make that recruiting ground stay hot and be able to say to the recruits, hey, you want to stay here because we have these rivalry games that your family and friends are going to be able to show up and watch you. Because I think when you watch how Howard Schellenberger built the U, he roped off that lower corridor of Miami and focused on just those recruits exclusively. And I think that's a similar system to what the Whip Eagles doing with Pitt. And I know people say, oh, yeah, well, they're not producing the type of talent that they have in the past. But when you bleed out your top recruits to these bigger programs, losing guys to Notre Dame, losing guys to Penn State, when your top, say, 10, 15 guys are choosing to go out of state, it's going to be tough. If they keep those kids at home, what does that do for the Pitt's program? I think all it takes is one or two guys, and it completely flips the script.
And that's why if they're going to 2 games, like you said, focus on bringing in West Virginia every year. Ask if you can do like Syracuse and Virginia Tech, because those are both drivable games. You can say, forget about Penn State. Who cares? Like, you can get the recruits. You're not going to be winning many recruiting battles in the eastern part of the state anyway because of Penn State. Focus on the West guys. Tell them, like, hey, you're going to have the West Virginia game every other year. You can see us play at home or whatever, or play at West Virginia. And then you have the Syracuse game, which isn't that far of a drive. Boston College would be much further. That's why I think I would focus on getting Virginia Tech back on there. And then if you could somehow, I don't know how the ACC is looking at doing it, but I would assume your 2 main rivals are going to be one's home and one's away each year. Then at least you have one drivable game guaranteed each year. Don't forget that you're probably going to schedule like Youngstown State or Toledo or whatever, Akron, like schools that are going to be around you. Like, that's where I would focus my non-conference outside of West Virginia. I think they should get back to it. Like, scheduling Western Michigan's cool, but you lose to them, it's like, all right, well, now your season's screwed. What are you doing? Focus on getting teams. You don't even have to play good teams. Like, no one remembers like who Alabama played before they played Auburn, because they always kill them. And that's a smart move. If I were Pitt, that would be the other thing that I would tell them to do is like, hey, move one of those games to the end of the year before they don't have a traditional rival. But that last weekend then could be the backyard brawl. Like if they could somehow bring that back to like the Thanksgiving weekend and do it like Friday night. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really that big of a rivalry game. You do it right after Thanksgiving. Say, hey, we're going to do this on Black Friday. We're going to have Friday night, West Virginia Pitt. Every year, we're going to lock it in. That's going to be our crossover rival game. I think Florida State plays Florida that week. Is that their crossover rivalry week game?
Yeah, it's usually Saturday because it's now run into the last 2 years with hunting season in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so Pitt could say like, hey, hunting season, I don't know if it starts on Black Friday or whatever, but go ahead, get it done on Friday. The rest of the ACC, like I just brought up Florida State because I thought that they would need that week too for an out-of-conference game. You have Georgia Tech, Georgia, that's out-of-conference. I'm sure there's a couple other ones, Clemson, South Carolina, right? Pitt can easily join that and tell them, West Virginia, tell the Big 12. Big 12 right now is being restructured. You're not going to have a bigger rival game that last week than our game. Like, honestly, you're going to be matched up against, like, who, Cincinnati? Like, that's not going to be the same as if you're hyped up against Pitt. And that's honestly, I think, could restore some of that balance. I looked down through the ACC. The main winner, if they did rebalance them, probably would have been Virginia Tech. It looks like they would have made a couple more championship games if there were no divisions. Outside of like, hey, Clemson, Georgia Tech, or whatever, it would have been like they would have overtaken Clemson there. And then the Wake Forest one. So yeah, you're in a division, you lose one game, you're tied, or whatever. Get rid of those divisions, and then that switches the tiebreakers up, and you don't get screwed in a tight division like that. So I think that's kind of like what would have happened. Pitt wouldn't have changed though. Like I said, they still have the chance to be there. Why not? Why not go for it? You need to keep being there. They've been to 2 ACC championships in the last 4 years, right? See if you can do that every decade. If you could hit 3 or 4 championship games every decade, you're going to be able to build your program into being able to recruit, at least from Pitt's perspective, even with this dynamic, whatever. And then maybe each decade you get one more. Every couple of years you get another championship game. You keep winning them. You win 3 or 4 championships, conference championships, recruiting is going to follow. Right? That's how Clemson started. They didn't win the national championships and then have recruiting just be like, oh, random, hey, here we are. No, they were already competing in the ACC and competing with Florida State. Florida State falls off, and there's Clemson right there saying, like, okay, we'll take over now. Pitt can do the same thing. Keep winning. If Clemson does fall off, Florida State doesn't come back, do you think Miami's coming back? Like, I'm not sold on Cristobal. I don't even think that was a good hire, to be honest. So, you can laugh, Matt. Are you scared of Miami?
No, mainly because I think they're in a similar situation that Florida State was in, where they've had so much recruiting issues with trying to consistently keep things where they need to be that I think that's going to be an issue.
If you told me that right now, at the end of this year, going in, that Michigan would be playing Miami in the playoffs, I would say, oh, hell yeah, I'll take that. Right?
Yeah.
They don't have the talent. They don't have the coaching. Like, I would think that would be a Michigan win. Like, no, I'm not a knock on Miami. I'm just not sold on Cristobal. I struggled out west. Oregon had so many things in their favor. I knew they upset Ohio State this past year, but, like, how are you not dominating, right?
Well, I think, like...
Pac-12's not even good, man. Utah's able to just plow through everybody, but Oregon can't get that back.
You're saying
Chip Kelly.
You're saying how Pitt doesn't have their confidence. It's like Miami has their confidence for them. Like, haven't won anything since the early 2000s. It's like, nah, we're right there. We're on our way back. And Pitt's like, they win the ACC. Like, well, we're not really that good. We just kind of got lucky.
Yeah, like, oh, thank you, Kenny Pickett. We'll never forget you. That's kind of how it is. It's almost embarrassing. Doing my comparison with the Big Ten, like if they did the no division championships, clearly the winner would be Michigan. making a couple more championship appearances. I think they would have 3 compared to the 1 that they have now. Because guess what? You get over the Ohio State hump. Like, that's basically it. I was kind of surprised that the winner wouldn't be Penn State, but Penn State wouldn't have picked up any championship. I know the Big Ten championship isn't that like old, and they only had they had sanctions or whatever. But people are telling me like, the top 2 teams are always going to be Ohio State and Penn State, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, Penn State has the same 1-9 record against Ohio State that Michigan has. Michigan has a better record head-to-head against Penn State in that same time. Michigan has blown out Ohio State this past year. Penn State hasn't beat Ohio State by more than a small margin since like 1999. I think it was when I looked it up. Like, when they beat Ohio State, it's by the skin of their teeth. And even when Jopo was there, even when like Luke Fickell was there, it's like, all right, what are you doing? Like, you can't be knocking on the door to take down Ohio State for 20 years, right? You haven't made the playoffs. You just were like, oh yeah, we beat Ohio State, but that same year, what happened? You got slammed by Michigan, keeping you out of the playoffs. Like, that loss to Michigan. So like, if you're going to be the team that's better than Michigan and ready to take down Ohio State, don't lose by 40 to Michigan, right? It was like 35 or something like that. It's like, you can't be down 42-0 in a game that I know was early in the year, and they probably, in hindsight, they didn't know that they were going to beat Ohio State that year. But in hindsight, like, that's the game where don't lose that game and you're in the playoffs. So don't tell me coming into the year, because as I'm looking through some of these predictions, it's like, well, Penn State in these no divisions are really going to help Penn State because they're really going to start winning more championships. Like, no, look back at the history. They wouldn't have. They wouldn't even be in the game. The team that's going to benefit is going to be Michigan, because how many times were they like almost tied with Ohio State, lose that last weekend? Pretty much a handful of times. And guess what? Now you're going to get a rematch with them, because like, I'm looking through these, they would have been every other time that Michigan would have added. Oh no, that first one, it would have been against Nebraska, because Ohio State wasn't eligible. You take them back, then what? They're playing Ohio State again? It's like, all right. And that's where I think the Big Ten needs to be careful, because do you really want Michigan-Ohio State rematches 3 or 4 times a decade, right? I don't think you do. I don't want that. I'd rather have the rematch be in the playoffs, right? I think you would agree.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a fan, like, let's say in a different world, you guys played Miami that last weekend as your rival, and we're back in like the 90s, and they're going to tell you, hey, good news, guys. We're going to have you guys play the last weekend, and you're going to play in the conference championship game almost every year, which is kind of eliminate one of you from the playoffs and really hurt our playoff chances, because that means like maybe the 3rd best team from the ACC gets in instead, because like maybe Wisconsin sneaks in and then loses.
Well, hell, that happened to Florida State in the 90s. They beat Florida in the regular season and then lost to them in the national championship.
Yeah, but that was the playoffs. In this scenario, it wouldn't even be the playoffs or the championship game. It would just be the conference championship game. So let's say Florida State loses that rematch, and then they're like, you know what? Sorry, guys. We knew you won the regular season, so you can at least hang that banner. You're not going to be in the playoffs anymore. You should have won both games. And I think that's where you're going to be. Hopefully, if Harbaugh can keep bringing Michigan back, maybe Ohio State gets that gimme and they take advantage and keep winning at the clip they've been having. And it doesn't really matter for the Big Ten, because as long as Ohio State's getting in. But I still think the Big Ten should do their showcase thing where, hey, every team's going to play a non-rematch game, and really say, I hate that too, because like, why is Rutgers playing another game if they have 2 wins against Maryland or something, you know? Like, why have that rematch? Because it doesn't do anything other than hurt your players. Take the top 4, like I said. Have your showcase weekend, and then really tell the committee, we have 2 really good teams. Like, I know that they battled Ohio State. Like, I know that they lost to Michigan, but really here they went up against Iowa that next weekend and really slammed them. I think both teams should make the playoffs. So what's the NCAA going to do then? Tell them no? Like, they're letting both SEC championship teams in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
So eliminate that extra chance where they can say, well, shouldn't have had that extra loss by giving them a showcase weekend. And that's what I want to see the ACC do too. Because I want to see more teams in the playoffs, and I think a showcase weekend would kind of give you the grip. The other thing that's been floated around, I don't know if you saw this, is to go back to the BCS Bowls and then select the playoff teams after. So I don't know how much traction this has got. And the one thing that kind of annoys me is if they had the asterisk where the Big Ten would play the Pac-12 every year again. And it's like, why? Why are you shooting yourself in the foot? Because, like, now with, let's say USC gets rolling and Ohio State's rolling, and they're both top 4 teams, now they're going to meet in the Rose Bowl and potentially eliminate each other from the 14 playoff, right? Because I really don't think they're going to put a potential rematch of the Rose Bowl in this 14 playoff that's formed after bowl season, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, that would pretty much benefit if they did do the rematch of the conference championships then too. I think that would benefit a team like Penn State or Michigan where, oh, hey, guess what? We lost to Ohio State in that rematch. Good thing they get to play USC now for that playoff spot. Why we might sneak in instead by beating Wake Forest in the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. People were like, hell yeah. Like, I think that plan would just kind of backfire. Because then why would you match up your best on best in the bowl games if they don't have a chance to get in, you know? Because I would think that, like, they're going to be looking and say, like, what big-name team did win that we can throw in here? Notre Dame? Nice. Well, they don't win bowl games, so they'd never make the playoffs again. So, like, Michigan winning the Fiesta Bowl, they beat Florida. Hell, could you imagine Florida and Michigan playing in their annual bowl game for a chance to sneak into playoffs, Matt? You'd hate it. Because you know what happened. To get that SEC on there, bam. But that's what I had. Do you have anything else for college football?
No.
I had one thing for the final bell, college related. The College Baseball World Series, Matt. NC State plays in the ACC. I'm going to keep this kind of an ACC show. And I'm watching the ACC tournament. They're winning, get all the way to the ACC championship game. And I know they were a 10 seed in the ACC tournament. Their RPI or whatever the NCAA always talks about in baseball was a 33. They lose. I'm like, all right, well, they're going to be picked, you know. So I'm like looking, all right, where the hell did NC State go? Snub. Didn't get picked at all.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, is the NCAA holding a grudge against them? Because last year with the COVID stuff, and they like complained about it, they get kicked out after COVID. And then their bowl game gets mysteriously canceled also because of COVID. And they said that UCLA forfeited. And then they were like, well, we're not going to actually award you guys with that win. And we're just going to say the game's canceled. And then Chip Kelly was like, no, we wanted to play. And NC State's like, no, we wanted to play. Who actually canceled the game? We still don't know who canceled that game. Did the NCAA just say, like, no, NC State's not getting that game? Who knows?
Well, then, I mean, the one thing that it showed is that there's no representation for the ACC. Like, there's no one that's going to bat for a NC State team.
And to be honest, it's like you're looking at it, and the representation, like, they seems to only care in the ACC about UNC and Duke, right, in basketball. Any other sport is kind of like, like here Notre Dame, you guys want our bowl game? Notre Dame's like, sure, we'll take it. That's a lot of money for us. And they're like, okay, Wake Forest, sorry, you're not playing in the, what's that bowl, that new one, the Meineke Care Bowl? I think it's in Detroit or something. And they're like, I guess if that's where you want us. They're like, yeah, you're 10-3. You're going to play 6-6 Mississippi State. It's like, what the hell? Why are we playing them? And that's exactly what happened here. They get snubbed. Happened in the women's basketball where NC State had a hell of a year. Great basketball team, and yet they're still traveling to play UConn in their regional. And it's like, why weren't they one of the top 4 seeds? Like, you look at that and they're like, we have all these top wins in basketball, and they're like, well, we know UConn has a star and they were hurt, so we'll give them the home seeding. We'll give them the home advantage, Matt. They might need it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense because why not rip them off? I had it up here, and So they were what did I say, 33 in the thing. This one doesn't have the rank, so it's either 33 or 31. I think it's 33. We'll go with the lower one. The Ole Miss was selected over them. Basically, same factor. They were ranked 38th, and it's like, okay, why is Ole Miss getting in? And someone was like, well, their record wasn't as good, and their conference record wasn't as good, but they had more series wins against something. And they're like, well, they didn't have as many as NC State, but they did have a series win against Tennessee or something like that.
They didn't have as many wins that mattered.
So they just cherry-picked like the one win that they did have and was like, well, they were our number one, so we got to put them in. It's like, yeah, but why have these other stats? And one of the committee members tweeted out, at least I think it was a committee member, his thing was like, well, if NC State's RPI was higher, which I think is the RPI, yeah. And they were 33. I have it up right here. And I'm like, could you imagine if it was basketball, Matt, and they had the 33 ranked team that was like Duke or UNC, and they're like, you know what? We got to let Ole Miss in. They're ranked 38 because they beat the number one team that one time. People would go batshit insane. Like, there would be riots.
Yes.
Like, are you kidding me? You're going to let UNC not go in because Ole Miss beat Kentucky and when they're ranked number one? Like, that's insane. And that's exactly how this is working out. And you would never, ever see this. And to even rub more salt in the wound, they let in Grand Canyon. Nothing against Grand Canyon, you know. They were ranked 50th in RPI. So even more absurd would be like, hey, sorry, UNC. We know you're ranked 33. We have to let Ole Miss in because they beat Kentucky. And we also got to let St. Mary's in because they played Gonzaga tough. And people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is insane. It would be on every television channel known to man. But the only people I see commenting on is like Florida State's coach. And like, if they would have kept Florida State out, because they said that 10 teams from the ACC made it, NC State finished 10th in the ACC. So, like, you're picking one team that's worse than them to even get in, and they played in the championship game? Like, I honestly have no idea how...
Yeah.
Against teams with winning records, the Wolfpack were 22-18. Ole Miss was 18-18. They finished 500. So they're even worse to there. So there's, like, no objective ranking that you can look at this and say, all right, they really did deserve to be in over NC State. And that's why I'm bringing this in. It's going longer on the show, but I'm like, I still don't understand how to wrap my head around it. And baseball is pretty much a Southern sport. It's favored towards like the SEC and the ACC, but like Grand Canyon getting in, cool. Like, I know they probably had a great record or whatever, but if you're not the auto bid, what are you doing? And I know people are saying like, oh, NC State should have just won. They should have just won the championship game then, but that's tough to do. So I don't know. It annoyed me. It also annoyed me that the focus from ESPN wasn't even on the snub. They focused on, of course, it was a Michigan guy that got ejected because he had pine tar or something on his glove. They never really even said what the substance was, Matt.
Well, it was all over him. He was like touching his jersey, they couldn't tell what he was. They were just like, just go. Just get out of here and go bathe.
He didn't even complain. And I would assume it was intentional. Maybe not. I don't have no idea. He's suspended for 4 games. So, that, of course, that's the breaking news. Not NC State getting ripped off, you know. They're like, well, let's bury that story. Let's talk about this guy. And then I clicked on the video. It didn't even show the video. It just had the refs or the umps talking about it. I'm like, I want to see, because I watched the game. I had the sound off because I'm like, hey, this feels like one of those years where Michigan's going to make a run. And I'm like, will they get in the playoffs? Because like in college baseball, it is kind of slanted towards like teams that have had success. NC State has had success. So they were just in the World Series like last year. So you would think, just like in college basketball, are they going to go ahead and get that extra push and get that bid? Maybe. But no, they won their championship game. So like they don't even have the NC State complaint. They get the automatic bid. But everyone's focused on like this glove. And I just think it's like hilarious that they even noticed it. That game was a run rule anyway. It was 13-1. So even if he wasn't ejected or whatever, people were like, they should have forfeited the game. It's like, all right. Why are you giving up 13 runs? Like, what are you doing? You got run rolled. The guy was cheating. He got caught. He was tossed. If every single pitcher that Michigan had that stuff all over them, then forfeit the game. But it didn't seem like that was the case. And then Rutgers also got ripped off because they were there, and I'm like, they weren't as high. NC State was the first team left out when they put that. I think Rutgers was like 2-3, maybe 4. But they were in the championship game with Michigan, had a great season. They were projected to make the tournament, lose in the championship game. Like, it's not like they lost in the first round of the Big Ten tournament or didn't even make the semifinals round. Like, no, you lose in the championship round, and the game, it wasn't that much of a beatdown. It was like 6-2 or 3 or something like that. Like, they had a chance to win it. And they were like, no, you're out too. The Big Ten can only have like 1 or 2 teams get in max. Like, I think they let Maryland in this time. So they're like, sorry, Rutgers, we already have enough teams from the North in this tournament. We got to get Grand Canyon in here, and we got to make sure NC State's not in, and you guys aren't in either. So that's my final bell. Complete bullshit. And then they're like, hey, why don't people want to watch college baseball? Like, we don't get it. And I'm like, if you compare it to basketball, everyone would be going insane. You could make the games more fun. You could bring it in and have more of a regional tournament. Like, I understand, like, you have all these teams in the South or whatever, and they do kind of play each other, but they're not playing at home. The Southern teams never come up north and play, ever. People complain about the football teams not doing it. The baseball teams never do it. And then, like, even the Big Ten tournament was in Omaha. Like, hey, thanks for joining the conference, Nebraska. We're really just going to play in Omaha now. You're not giving us any benefit. Remember when you were supposed to be good? And I like all the Nebraska fans are like, well, Big Ten baseball really ruined us. It's like, Michigan's had success. They were in the national championship series like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. How's your team that bad? How is your every sport that you're in that bad when you're getting more money? I don't understand it, Nebraska. Like, Maryland's not having problems. I think did I send you the championships? Because I heard a lot of Nebraska fans were like bitching about how, well, the Big Ten just sucks right now. Over the past 5 years, the Big Ten championships, Michigan has 50. Ohio State has 38. Maryland has 25. Nebraska has 6. Like, even Notre Dame has 3. And they only play like one sport. So, like, Nebraska, instead of complaining, how about winning some Big Ten championships? These aren't even national championships. And then this year, Michigan has 12. Ohio State has 8. Nebraska has 1. So, Maryland has 5. They're tied with Iowa for 3rd. So, like, hey, you're getting extra money now. Maryland is clearly taking advantage. They might not be taking advantage in basketball and football yet. But I think they just won another lacrosse national championship. Nebraska had a run in volleyball. You're supposed to be like the baseball school. I don't understand how Michigan can recruit better than you in baseball when they barely play baseball up north anymore. What are you doing? What are you doing? That's my final bell. You have anything for the final bell?
Yeah, go to southboundsports.com and appreciate all the ongoing support.
And make sure you cheer for Michigan to make the College Baseball World Series. Florida State probably won't make it.
Yeah, because they won't be rolling around in pine tar and maple syrup.
Yeah, maybe it is maple syrup. It grows on trees up north. They don't have it in the south, so they were kind of confused on what was going on. They did show a bunch of pitchers eating. What if it was syrup? That'd be hilarious. I don't think they said what it was. Even the coach looked at it and was like, "Are you shitting me?" And he just walked away. He turned and walked away. That's why it would be like, oh, like you have to think people were like, I bet it's like an organized team cheating thing. The coach would look at that and he would know about it. He would probably have put up a bigger fight of like, that doesn't count or whatever. Not looking at it and saying like, yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. I understand. And then just walking away.
I can't believe he's covered in maple syrup. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, I told him not to eat those pancakes. What is he doing?
No, he was a French toast sticks.
No, it's probably the what do they call those things? You know, they have them at schools where it's like the the pancakes wrapped around sausage. You dip it right in the syrup there.
There you go.
That's what it is, like the corn dog, but it's not a corn dog. It's like a breakfast version. Got to have the syrup all over yourself, but
healthy breakfast covered on the next podcast.
Yeah, we'll talk about some things. I do got the Big Ten 10K coming up. It's $30 this year to sign up. Run virtually, dude. You get a free T-shirt. You can get a classic Michigan shirt, has a year on it. Get a bunch of compliments and go blue as you're walking around. So definitely sign up for that. But don't be eating pancakes wrapped around sausage dipped in syrup. Not going to help your time.
You will be sharding during the 5K.
So that's all we have this week. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends. Make sure you keep downloading the show. It really helps the podcast, even if you don't listen to the whole thing. And we'll see you next week.